Hi, this is Roger. Thanks for dropping by. Welcome to another 2023 Project Orchids video. This is being filmed out of set, basically, early. Basically because this repot is necessary and I don't want to wait for the time slot where it would normally have been filmed. However, that's when it will be posted, i.e. now. Anyway, what we're looking at is the second video for Project Orchid number 4, which is our Paphiopedilum Black Jack. And we lifted it out of the pot in video number 1, and it was decided that it was soaking wet, the roots didn't look too good, and it needed a repot. So that's what we're going to do now. It will lift out of the pot with no effort at all. We'll keep the tag. And I'll leave the old media in the pot on the grounds it makes less mess. I'm just going to knock off the old media. I'm not going to go mad here because, believe it or not, although this is a bit soggy, the roots aren't. So it was the media that was the problem, and in the not too distant future the roots would have been the next problem on the list. But I think this has been caught good enough. So if you look at the root system, these are firm. There's no soggy roots here, they're all actually firm. There's none actively growing. I'm hoping to put that right now. So there's no cleanup to do on this, there's no cutting of roots. I'm not going to separate any of the growths, they're all attached, all three of them. And we'll see how we get on. I'm relatively confident, if that's in focus, that that is a new growth. If that's a new growth, it's highly unlikely this one will bloom. Whether the other one will, round this side, who knows? We'll have to wait and see. But anyway, we've got some roots. Let's get going. Now, I've got a pot that is around the same size, but it is slightly deeper. That will allow me to put the plant a bit deeper in the pot, yeah, so that it'll support itself. That's my theory, is that it will be self-supporting. So I was just looking at that white stuff on the underside, but it's at some point in its life it's been sprayed with something, I think, and there's some residual on some of the leaves, which I'm not going to worry about. Right, so we need a mix. Now, first off, I've looked up what lots of different people think is a good media for Paphiopedilums, and they all give general advice. What they don't do is be specific, because not all Paphiopedilums are created equal, but they keep getting treated equal, which annoys me. You know, that's like saying a dendrobium that grows in the top of the trees is the same as one that grows on the moss in the rocks. It's not. And Paphiopedilums can come from quite different environments, including the forest floor, rocky environments, places where there's water runoff, you know, sort of on rocky outcrops where water runs past. These are different environments, and in my book require probably different media. So you can't generalise like that. However, I've got a hybrid, so I'm not a flipping clue what sort of environment it wants. The reason for getting some moss out is one of the reasons I've gone back to moss for specific reasons. And one of those specific reasons is root generation and root regrowth and stimulating roots. And this type of New Zealand moss is very good at doing that. Doesn't really matter even what type of orchid it is, it just seems to be very good at getting roots going again on plants that have, you know, gone downhill and have lost or partially lost their root system. Now, this one hasn't lost its root system, but I'd like to generate some new ones. Paphiopedilum roots don't branch very often. That's not a natural occurrence, but they can shoot out and they can regrow. So where there is no growing tip, one can start again. I didn't get that out of a book. When I used to grow them, I've seen that for myself. So no substitute for the real thing, as they say. Right, I've broken that up. That's not going in the whole pot. That's going near the top of the pot where the roots are. The bottom of the pot, no. But we don't use that stuff dry. That stuff we do actually give a bit of a soak. Get it going, sort of thing. It's initially when it's dry like this, it absorbs a lot of water from this totally dry state. So if you put it in the pot in that totally dry state, it will take all the water out of the surrounding media, leaving that almost bone dry. Okay, the moss will have some moisture, but the rest of the media won't. So we give that a bit of a soak. Get that going. Right, what else are we going to do? We're going to dry my hands off, otherwise it's why I tend to try and use dry media, because wet media sticks to everything, including sides of pots, roots, and doesn't get down into all the crevices. So let me just get the moss out of the way. We won't know. It's only a small amount. Now this in here is a mix I made up a while ago. There's nothing wrong with it. It's basically small bark and some perlite. Well, this was mixed up for another reason. So this is basically the media I want to use, and that's more than enough. But what I am going to do is add a little more perlite, if I can get into this tub, which is sometimes reluctant to let go of the lid. I just want to be a bit heavy on the perlite. I was looking at some pictures of, people that have decided that this is a good media for Paphiopedilums. Perlite is often involved. Small fir bark is the mainstay, but some of the mixes did look a bit heavy on the perlite, so I'm going to, I've added a bit more in, follow the trend, especially when some of the information has come from specialist growers. Those are the people that you go to. I mean, there is a Paphiopedilum specialist nursery in this country. I've never been to it. I think it's up north somewhere, which is probably why. So their information is probably pretty good stuff. Now I'm putting some in without the moss to cover the air cone, and then I'm going to see what this is going to look like. All the roots will go in, and that can go down so that it rests on the side of the pot. That's quite deep. That's good. So I'm going to mix the moss in with what's left, and that will go around the roots. Now what I always do with moss, not everybody does, is I give it a squeeze to get the worst of the water out. It just mixes in better like that. So we will add our moss. I bet a lot of people are thinking, I didn't think I would ever see that New Zealand sphagnum moss on a Rogers Orchids repotting video ever again. Well, it has its purposes. Now I did substitute the moss for the cocoa husk for a while, cocoa chunks, but it did some good in some places, but overall I'm not as happy as I at first was. I think it's good stuff, but I think it needs reasonable temperatures so that it doesn't stay wet too long, which is what was happening with me basically. And with my cool temperatures, that basically was a no-no. It was just staying wet far too long. Yeah, it's amazing how many different mixes I came up with this morning, but basically the main ingredients that averaged across all of the different places that I looked was fir bark and perlite. Some added moss in, some added charcoal, some added moss and charcoal. So it was a right old mix basically, but The main thing is to remember that a lot of places you read about Paphiopedilums will call them terrestrials across the board, and that's not true, because some of them are basically, you would have to class them as lithophytes. In other words, they grow on rocks. And the ones that grow on the forest floor, yes, I would say that's terrestrial, although they're growing in the leaf litter, not in the actual soil. In the main, not across the board again. And I've seen film of a type of Paphiopedilum that is deemed to be a shade lover, and it was growing on an island, one of those islands you see in the tropics, the Far East, that basically stick out of the water. Just a column of rocks sticking out of the water with green bits on. And this was filmed from quite a way off. And this face of this rock and this greenery had like white shadows on it that you couldn't work out what it was. And gradually, as they moved closer in the boat and closer, this rock face was covered in Paphiopedilum delenatii. Yeah? Hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of them in bloom, in full sun, getting splashed with seawater. And doing very nicely. Now, if you put that in a book and said that's how you should grow that particular Paphiopedilum, people would get you taken off to the funny farm. But that's where they were growing, and they were doing very well indeed. And you know, this goes to show sometimes that you know, the plants can make exceptions to the rules. Well, if they can, so can we. Okay, so I'm just up to around the level of the base. Certainly not burying the base of the plant. Just up to the base. Now my new growth here is going to have room to grow, because it's strange, although the leaves are quite strappy and spread out, the actual base of the growth is quite narrow. Quite narrow. So there's plenty of room for this new growth. It will be quite tight to the edge of the pot, but there's room for it. Right, so we will give that a good soak now, and then we will not water it again until it is quite dry. The only thing I want, because of its potential terrestrial nature, is we want one of these. Yeah? It's better to keep the light out, and that's a perfect size for this one, because it leaves the rims sticking out, which means when I want to water it I can take it out, but it'll keep the light off. And I've got a lot more pots that I need to do that to stop the algae growth, because we're getting into the longer days and everything now. So we'll put our tag back in. We'll put it somewhere about there, and we'll see how it goes. I'm hoping that we will initiate some root growth. Now, again, the ancient scrolls will say that the mottled leaf types tend to be warmer growers than the plain ones. But again, that's not across the board. There are variables going both ways. But my temperatures, my daytime temperatures in here are getting artificially increased now. I'm up to 20 at the moment, so I'm forcing 20 degrees on the plants for most of the day length, which is considerably more than it was 2 or 3 weeks ago when I was at 19 degrees. So we're getting there. Right, so that's that one, and because that's a nice clean one, it's going in there. Right, thanks for dropping by. See you next time. Wish me luck. I've attempted these in the past and failed miserably, so let's hope this one, if this one pulls on and grows roots and seems to be doing okay, who knows, I may get some more. See you next time. Thanks for dropping by.